Today we're going to take a look at a bit of an enigma, the Rolleiflex SL35. Most people are probably familiar with Rollei for their TLRs, or twin lens reflex cameras, which are generally considered to be the ultimate TLRs. But they also made other cameras, including the SL35, which was their first foray into the 35mm SLR market. It was introduced in 1970, with the first couple of years being manufactured in Germany before production was moved to their factory in Singapore. Some say that the German-made models were better quality, but I've only handled the Singapore-built copies myself, so I can't comment on that. A few years later they introduced the SL35, which was an updated version with open aperture metering rather than the stop-down metering of the original model. In 1976 the SL35 M was released, and this is a completely different camera. It's based on the Zeiss Ikon SL706, which then became the Voigtlander VSL-1. Rollei had acquired the Voigtlander brand from Zeiss a few years earlier. The first VSL-1 camera had a screw mount lens, but this was changed to the QBM, or quick bayonet mount lens system of the SL35 in 1976. The Rolleiflex SL35 M and the Voigtlander VSL-1 are basically the same camera, although there are some detail differences. There was also an SL35 ME which had an auto exposure mode, and latterly the SL35E came along in the late 70s. When you put the SL35M next to the original SL35, you realise how massive it is, or how small the original model was. And it feels a little on the cheap side in places, such as the screen printed name rather than the engraved and painted lettering on the SL35. Anyway, back to the subject of this video, the original SL35. It's a fairly basic camera, which isn't a bad thing at all, but possibly at the time it might have been hard to compete with some of the fancy machinery coming from Japan. Luckily it had that historic name to fall back on, a name that conjures up images of those classic TLR cameras used by professionals all around the world to capture photographs that are still revered to this day. And that's where the enigma comes in. I see the word Rolleiflex and immediately raise my expectations, so any minor defect or poor design choice stands out like a sore thumb. If the SL35 had any other name on it, I'd say that it was a brilliant camera, but bearing the Rolleiflex name, it's only almost brilliant. So I'll do a quick tour around the camera and show a few shots taken using it before picking holes in those minor irritations. On the front is the self-timer lever. It's all pretty normal stuff. Advance the film. Wind the self-timer lever to the 6 o'clock position. Start the timer by pressing the chromed button that's usually hidden beneath the lever, and wait for approximately 10 seconds as the timer whirs away before the shot is taken. Thusly. The lenses are of course rather nice. I've got the Carl Zeiss Planar 50mm f1.4 on this one, so no complaints there. I've also got this Rolleiflex 135mm f2.8. I haven't used this one yet, but I'm sure it'll be quite nice. Beyond that, I sometimes use my Tamron Adaptall 28mm when I want to go wide, because I can't afford a Zeiss 28mm lens. The lens release button is round on the other side, and works exactly how you'd expect it to work. We've got flash sync ports for electronic flash and flash bulbs, and other than that the front is clear of distractions. On the top left is the flip-out rewind crank, which fairly predictably lifts up to release the back door. Unusually the frame counter is situated on the left of the camera, right beside the rewind crank. More about that later in the video. There's no hot shoe or cold shoe, although you could get an accessory shoe that clipped over the viewfinder eyepiece. Shutter speeds range from 1/1000 of a second down to 1 second and bulb. and the film speed is set by lifting the outer ring before rotating it to select speeds between 6400 ISO and 12 ISO. The shutter release button is in the middle of this, and many examples that I've seen have a screw-in plate to make this more comfortable to press. And with the plate removed, a standard cable release can be screwed in. Next to that is the film advance lever, and in front of that is the stop down button. This stops the lens down to the selected aperture and turns on the exposure meter. And although you'd quickly get used to this, I have inadvertently attempted to take a photo using this button, thereby missing that vital moment. On the bottom is the tripod socket in the middle, the rewind release button on the right, and the battery hatch for the single PX625 battery. Although I generally use an external handheld meter when I'm out shooting with this camera, or any of my other non-electronic cameras for that matter. Loading a film is much the same as on other cameras. Open the back door, insert the film canister, push the rewind crank back in, pull the film leader across and insert the end into the slot marked with the arrows. Rotate the take-up spool backwards until the sprockets on the film are engaged with the teeth in the sprocket drum, and take up any slack by rotating the rewind crank backwards. And then close the back door. Advance and fire a couple of shots, and then you're ready to go. Oh yeah, and the viewfinder has a microprism in the centre with a ground glass around that. Over on the right is the exposure meter needle, and with the stop down button pressed, adjust the shutter speed or aperture until the needle sits in the middle of the cutout and your exposure should be correct. Okay, time to look at a few shots taken using the SL35, and then I'll talk about some of its good and not so good points. Overall, I really like the SL35. It's small, relatively light at around 840 grams with the f1.4 lens attached. The lenses are great, the shutter sounds lovely, albeit that I've stripped and serviced this one, so it should sound nice. The controls are simple and uncluttered, and I think the camera looks really attractive and understated. But there are a few minus points. The film advance lever looks quite slim and elegant, but it's not the nicest lever to use compared to some of my other cameras. All the copies of this camera that I've handled have had their plastic lever end missing, and my copy was no exception, so a 3D printed one based on photos that I'd seen. I suspect that these lever ends were made of whatever slightly questionable plastic Rollei were using at that time. Whatever it is, it has a habit of cracking. If I get in close, you can see that the stop down button also has a crack running through it. That questionable plastic isn't restricted to the SL35 either. I worked on this Rollei B35 for a friend, and it suffered some severe plastic cracking, along with a camera stopping build quality issue, where they'd selected the wrong length screw to secure the winder mechanism. It was too short and didn't even thread one full turn into the chassis beneath. Inevitably it fell out and got wedged in the film advancing mechanism, jamming the camera completely. There was also a manufacturing defect on my Rollei A110. This belonged to a friend in the 1980s, and when it started overlapping frames he took it for repair, only to be told that it couldn't be fixed. So he gave it to me, and I finally took a look at it a couple of years ago. The winding mechanism is beautifully designed, but the gear that I'm removing in this clip consists of two gears of different pitches, stacked on top of each other and crimped together. That crimping process hadn't been done very well, and the drive between the two gears was lost, thereby causing the frame spacing issues. Obviously that is now fixed, and this camera has film in it. Another dodgy plastic was also used for parts of the frame counter on the SL35. I can't remember now whether it had cracked or just distorted, but someone had clearly tried to stop it sticking in the past and failed, so I had to do quite a bit of work to get it functioning correctly. None of those issues are particularly serious, it's just that my expectations were raised due to the name badge on the front. Internally, with the exception of the frame counter, it's nearly all metal gears, linkages and levers, all beautifully made and exactly what you'd expect from the Rolleiflex name. If you were to lay out all the components on a bench, you'd swear that the frame counter came from a different camera, possibly one that was about 10 years younger. It's as if they designed the entire camera and then thought, have we missed something? Ooh, I know. What about a frame counter? Perhaps we should add one of those. When I first got the camera, it had a fairly typical list of problems, such as a sluggish shutter, a squeak when advancing the film, a sticking frame counter, and the lens stop-down pin would stick, leaving the lens stop down after you had taken the shot. But there was also one other problem. If I was pointing the camera straight ahead, the focusing worked fine, but if I pointed it downwards and focused on my subject, after I'd taken the shot, the focus would have changed. Then, as I advanced the film, it would change back again. It wasn't anything loose on the lens, because it happened no matter what lens I used. I thought it might have been a loose focusing screen. I've had that before on other cameras. So while I was stripping down the camera to service it, I checked everything. The focusing screen was held as it should be, so therefore it had to be the mirror. But I couldn't find anything wrong. I was keen to use the camera, so I reassembled everything and decided to work around the problem. In actual use it wasn't too bad, but I also found that the focus was moving when I shot in portrait format. Again, I worked around this by focusing with the camera landscape and then recomposing. I shot a few rolls like this with no focusing disasters, but it didn't inspire confidence, and I wouldn't fancy trying to shoot wide open portraits with the camera like that. Since then the camera has just been put to one side, waiting for me to look at it again. And armed with the knowledge that the problem also occurs when the camera is in portrait orientation, I popped it on a tripod to examine exactly what was happening. It had been somewhat difficult to see what was going on when the camera was pointing downwards. And it didn't take many seconds to spot that, after the shutter has fired, the mirror sits nice and tight against its adjustable stop. But then, as I advance the film, the tension is released, allowing the mirror to move away from the stop. When I'm holding the camera in the horizontal orientation, gravity is on my side, keeping the mirror against the stop. But when it's either pointing towards the ground or in portrait orientation, the mirror can move. I haven't looked to see what's causing this yet, but it won't be too difficult to fix now I know what's going on. Although it probably will require another full strip down. Although it might sound like I'm grumbling about the SL35, I do really like the camera, and once I've sorted that mirror issue it will work perfectly, so I'm quite excited about using it again. As you might expect, the ever-ready case and strap are made from lovely soft leather, giving them that premium feel. I'm also quite looking forward to using the Voigtlander VSL-1. I think it's a bit prettier than the SL35 M, but my copy has just jammed during the filming of this video, so that one will be coming apart for a rebuild sometime in the future. I do also have a spare parts machine if needed. And with that, I think I can end the video. If you've enjoyed watching, please like the video and maybe even subscribe to the channel, not forgetting to click on the bell icon so you get notifications when future videos are released. That's it for now, so thanks for watching and I'll see you in a future video.